We're 1 year into Splatoon 3, and the game's balance has been in the best spot it's ever been in the series, so I think this is a perfect time to revisit the best and worst of every weapon class. We've started covering the first half of the best weapons, but let's take a detour and cover all of the worst ones, before we get to the last of the best ones. Of course, disclaimer, this is mostly a competitive list. Play whatever you want. This is not about a fun factor. This is just about what kind of stuff will win tournaments. So with that all being said, subscribe to make sure you don't miss the best of every weapon class. There's some serious competition in that one, and let's get started. We're gonna go in backwards order for the classes this time, so we're starting with the Splatoonus. During crab meta, this class was very popular, but it's dropped off a decent bit recently. Stuff like tactical meta has made other weapons able to keep up with stuff like wiper speed, while the lack of objects to shred has made stuff like zipcaster and stamper be a little bit more difficult, along with some nerfs to that weapon. There were some positive changes, however, like some of the hammer buffs and new wiper deco kit, and both these weapons are in a fine spot right now. If I had to pick the worst one so far though, I think I would have to go with the vanilla wiper. Wiper deco and stamper are definitely a close competition we'll have to revisit when we get to the best weapons, one being a very strong slayer option with the recently buffed zipcaster, and the other having a very dominant beacon and missile niche. Vanilla wiper on the other hand, while still totally fine and seeing relevant use in comp, has struggled a bit recently. Ultra Stamp is back to being in the weaker part of specials, and with all the Splatlings and shooters, it's quite easy to shoot through it. While Tacticooler makes other weapons able to play to the pace of Splatoon Wiper Strafe Speed, which hasn't been boosted by Cooler's run speed since it doesn't work on it. The combination of weaker special and main weapon being made a bit weaker by Cooler being in the meta is what puts it in the worst spot to me, but I think it's still a solid option that's totally viable to use in the hands of good players. Stringers, on the other hand, have gotten nothing but buffs since the release of the game, and it's been really interesting to decide with both a new Tri-Stringer kit as well as a Reflux kit which one is the absolute worst. For the Tri-Stringer, I definitely give the new kit an edge, something I'll talk about more when we get to the best weapons, but for the Reflux versus the vanilla Tri-Stringer, it's a hard competition. Neither of these really see a lot of competitive use at all. There's some theory crafting for comps they might work in, and they both have their own strengths, but nothing's really been proven. Well, with one exception. Reflux is quite a popular turf war weapon. In fact, so popular that the recent change to it has actually slightly nerfed it in turf by reducing its paint output. This weapon has been a staple for being able to get missile reliably and keep the floor painted, and the recent changes seem to be doing a good job of making it a bit more of a fighter. From what I've seen from some Reflux players, it seems like having the shots be closer together earlier does give you some access to new options and makes it a little bit easier to hit partial charges or tap shot 60 damages. Because of that, I think even with a small painting nerf, Reflux is probably going to be fine as a turf war weapon and has a bit of a chance to see some niche uses in normal ranked modes. Because of that, I'm going to have to rank the vanilla Tri-Stringer as the worst. We'll compare those kits more when we get to the best weapons though. On to the Brellas. Recently, these weapons finally got buffed, with regular Brella and Undercover both regenning their shield faster. Over the course of a year, there's been plenty of bug fixes, and more importantly than any of that though, the Sorella Brella brand has been killing it with these weapon kits. I mean, Sorella 10 is almost a top tier with just the insane capabilities of Zuka on it and mine working it well, but on top of that we also got the Sorella Brella. Autobomb and Jetpack are an insane kit. So trust me guys, when we get to the best weapons, we got a heated competition between those two, trust me. For now, though, we gotta talk about the worst ones. Vanilla 10 can easily be out of the running for the worst, as Vacuum's been buffed recently, and 10's definitely the best of all the main weapons right now, which leaves the Vanilla Brella against the Undercover. Honestly, from playing a lot more of the Vanilla Brella, I've kinda disliked it more than I ever have. Tri-Strike just really doesn't fit it with the positions it wants to play, and now that it has a kit with much better synergy, it's been more than clear. Even with that, though, I just can't put it any lower than Undercover Brella. Yeah, the weapon regens its shield a little bit faster now, but it breaks so easily, it does pathetic damage, its kit is awful, and Reef Slider is arguably the worst or second worst special in the game right now next to Ultra Stamp. Zone's Cheese is really the only place you can justify this weapon, and if you want a slider weapon that can fight well, the new Dread Ringer and S-Blast 92 are fine with that. There's Tetra, which is a staple niche even if it doesn't get it as much, and if you want weapons that can spam it, even the Silver Aerospray has a fizzy bomb to throw at people and gets way more of them. Yeah, hopefully the Sorella brand can work its magic whenever the new undercover Brawler comes out. On to the dualies. This has been a bit of a tricky one to rank. For the best weapons, it's kind of shifted around a little bit, but for the worst ones, there's kind of been a clear candidate for a while, which is the Dapple dualies. In fact, the only reason this is kind of interesting right now is debating which Dapple dualie is worse. The Dapple Nouveau kit competes very heavily with the Tetra dualie with the weak special, but has a very solid sub and it at least fits the role. While the vanilla Dapple dualie has one of the best specials right now, but really no way to get the weapon in. If I had to pick one though, I would actually go with the vanilla Dapple. Tacticooler output is really important, and especially since they just recently nerfed that, you can't really run multiple cooler weapons on your comp. And with how important Tacticooler is, it just makes it hard to justify a vanilla Dapple that might get very little of them. Even if you do want the beacons and up-close options, there's plenty of other beacon weapons you can run alongside other cooler options. And with so many powerful Tacticooler weapons right now, I just don't really see a niche for it, even in Rainmaker. On to the brushes. I don't think this class is in a very good spot right now. Octobrush Nouveau wasn't a great kit, Paintbrush has really struggled to see any form of competitive use, and Inkbrush has been suffering a little bit from the speed increases to everything else with Tacticooler meta. I think the vanilla Octobrush has a little bit more merit to be used as a Zipcaster niche on modes like Clam Blitz with the special being buffed, but the Octobrush Nouveau also has a pretty solid niche on Flounder. And yeah, that's one map, but it's very dominant on that map in my opinion. Because of that, I kinda turn to Paintbrush. It's nice this thing got an ink efficiency buff at least, but even with that, it really struggles. It can't paint very long, so it's in an awkward spot to be supportive, and because of the wind-up, potentially long kill time if you're not next to people, and just overall very slow speed, this thing really struggles to get kills against more aware players, and I don't think its Wavebreaker output is really that notable either, nor Wavebreaker in a spot to help it. It's clear that the wind-up is much more of a weakness than we originally thought, and I think it's gonna leave it as the worst. On to the blasters. So, to no one's surprise, the Clash is the worst blaster, it's just picking between the kids. Honestly, blasters as a whole have been in a pretty good spot right now. Tacticooler has helped them pretty significantly, and for all of the other ones, I think they have reasons and situations where they could be used in. Clash, though, really just struggles. While it has a bit of speed, the blast radius is there on the S-Blast, which has way more options to be able to use it. The real only claim to fame Clash has is the kids, and I guess Clash Neo is slightly worse. Zuka's been buffed, so that's in a pretty solid spot, and Clash Neo's Curling Bomb and Super Chump are definitely a little bit weaker than Spot Bomb and Try Zuka. I wish I had more interesting stuff to say, but yeah, Clash hasn't really changed over the years, so it's not much new. A horrible kill time, hard competition from other blasters, and even with solid kits, a low special output really keeps this thing just absolutely stuck at the bottom of the tier list. Up next is the Splatlings, and I mean, damn, this update added Ballpoint Nouveau with a solid kit and Heavy Edit, potentially the strongest weapon added in this update. Splatlings are just in such an amazing spot. There's so many good picks for them. Honestly, even trying to pick between the worst Splatlings has solid options that you're going against. The mini Splatlings with their lackluster kits and Hydra Splatling with its slow speed is probably the main competition right now. Hydra doesn't see a lot of use, but I still think it's very solid at holding down space on maps where it doesn't have to move too much, especially on zones. Stuff like Scorch come to mind. Mini Splatlings, though, have seen some actual use in Japanese tournaments, with both of their kits. Even if they're really uncommon, the main weapon's still really solid. So I can definitely see reasons to pick them for the unique power that they provide, and because of that, even though I think Hydra has some solid uses, I'd probably have to rank it at the bottom. It's a Splatling though, you know, so even this is far from a bad spot. Cool to see the weapon class in such a good position. Sloshers right now are doing pretty well. It's got Tri-Nouveau and Vanilla Slosher in pretty good spots, Machine is still usable, and Dreadringer is something that could be considered for zones depending on how it develops. However, it's definitely got some weaker options. Explosher has been a surprise weaker weapon in this game. While it was looked at initially as very solid due to its stronger kits compared to Splatoon 2, having to go against Crab, which can barely do anything against, or Inkjet, which is like a 95-5 terrible matchup, has made it struggle a lot. I think its main argument to be used would be in zones, but even then we haven't seen much of it at all. Its only real competition on the worst end though would be the Blobs, with the vanilla Vanilla Blob and Blob Deco, as the main weapons have really struggled to see much use competitively outside of a handful of players. And even then, it doesn't really have a lot of results. The weapon has some walling out capabilities and a bit solid DPS, which makes it not as bad against Crab, though its matchup against Jetpack is equally bad. Really though, this is a competition to me of can Blob Deco's niche in some kind of Clan Blitz environment with Kraken be more useful than Explo being argued to be fine on zones, even with the horrible special matchups. And personally, I have to give the edge to the Explo. I think there's other comparable Kraken options on Clan Blitz, even if you do want to run that kind of cheese. So ultimately, I think Blob Deco is stuck at the worst of the buckets. On to the Chargers, and I mean, this is another class that's in a relatively solid spot, with Snipe Rider seeing some use, some of the normal Chargers being solid. It looks pretty good, but I mean, there's one clear candidate for the worst Charger, isn't there? Yeah, so Custom GoodTuber's in a bit of a rough spot. Obviously, it's the weakest of the main weapons when it comes from Chargers. I think it's really hard to find an argument for it over any of the other ones. But on top of that, it just doesn't really have that good a special. The kit's super fun, don't get me wrong, but having a special that gets shredded so much by shooters and Splatlings is just not the best right now. With practically no results, it's pretty hard to argue for GoodTuber as a whole, let alone the kit that's near universally agreed to be the worst one. Rollers is another category where there's a very clear and obvious winner. Carbon Deco is a very solid main weapon right now, and its kit has just been made in the perfect spot. It's gotten some random buffs over the years, and with Zuka in the best spot it's ever been in, yeah, it's doing great. And then there's the Vanilla Carbon, which the devs seem to be trying to make better. I mean, it's 170p, the lowest points for special in the game, and they just buffed Zipcaster. But I mean, come on. Do you know what Burst Bomb can do with Carbon? Do you know how much better Zuka is as a special right now than Zipcaster? Like, it's so hard to sell this. Burst Bomb Zuka just has been the perfect kit for this weapon in a previous game and in this one. It's really hard to beat that. And while other rollers have problems, Swig struggles to fight, Flings is in a bit of an awkward spot, Dynamo Roller is Dynamo, at least those have their strengths. Big Swig paints a lot, Flings still is a solid missile niche weapon with long distance paint. Vanilla Carbon is the one that's picked the least, and currently doesn't really have any reason to be used. Finally, we're on the shooters. I will split up long and short range, and for long range, there's another very obvious one. We have the vanilla long arrow spray Nova. Yeah, so in a meta with Cooler that's all about fighting, having the long range shooter that struggles with it the most, without a sub that can deal damage, with a special that's kind of mediocre right now and only has a very limited window to combo off it. Yeah, this weapon has kind of become one of the rarest things to find in the game. Like, seriously, even in solo or open, finding one is just an absolute anomaly. I see it like one every 100 games. The main weapon's just not great right now, and while the Anarchy Nova that can spam Jetpack and at least has mines for some traps to help with the damage can see some use, there's really not a reason to pick this one. The only thing that I could slightly compare to it would be the Vanilla Pro, but even that's gotten dart buffs, and the main weapon paints decently now, so it gets a solid amount of crabs. Pretty hard to argue that the Vanilla Pro would be worse than it. Finally is the short range shooters, with our last obvious option, and it's another whale one. It's the Neo Sploosh. Honestly, I think Sploosh right now is a bit better than I'm giving it credit for. At least in Rainmaker, I think the speed and DPS has been really useful, and honestly, I could still definitely see that kit in some situations. Sploosh is a main weapon that I think is a little bit underrated, and it's just unfortunately faced harsh competition from Wiper with similar kits. The unique acceleration it has and fast speed is really cool. Unfortunately, the Neo Sploosh can't play to any of it. It's really hard to take advantage of that speed when you have practically no way to move anything longer range than you out of the way. And because you're a Sploosh, longer range is, well, pretty much everything. Even getting your killer whale takes a long time because you can't paint very far away and have beacons. And when you finally do get it, well, whale's pretty difficult to combo off of with how close you need to get, and if you're gonna close that gap, having one less shot to kill on a weapon that fires that fast really isn't that helpful. Really, its only claim to fame is to try to beat behind people, set up annoying beacons, and then use your global range special, except there's kind of another weapon in the game that also does that, but with a better special, and with a weapon that has actual range. So, yeah, sorry. Unfortunately, Sploosh Neo really is in a bad spot right now. But with that being said, that's the worst weapon in every class. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you all next time.